Welcome to Kingdom Builder TV. I'm your host, Jay Heilman. Thank you so much for coming by today to check out another great interview. I am excited about our guest joining the show today. He's singing lead vocals for a band that he founded a little over 2 decades ago, a melodic power metal band called Theocracy. Joining us from that band is Matt Smith. Matt, how you doing today, man?
Hey, Jay, pleasure to be here. I apologize, everyone, for my lack of voice at the moment, but I'm happy to be here, man.
We're glad to have you, man. Lifting you up in prayer. Hope you feeling better here soon.
Thank
Well,
you.
as
Thank
mentioned,
you.
Matt, you're the lead singer for the band Theocracy. You guys are out of Athens, Georgia. And for those that are tuned in that might not be familiar with the band yet, can you tell us a little bit about Theocracy and how you guys came to be?
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, the first album came out way back in 2003, which is hard to believe. But it started as a solo project of mine, just not intentionally, but sort of by design. It was because I wanted it to be a band, but I didn't know anyone else who wanted to play the type of music that I played because I grew up outside of Athens, Georgia, kind of in the country, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And so I had written songs for years and years and years, and I finally had a group of songs that I felt good about, and right around that same time, there was a guy named Darren who worked for a label called Metal Ages, and he heard that group of songs, and he said, these are great. We should put these out. So basically, he released my initial batch of demos kind of as the first album, and then it kind of went from there. As the years and other albums went by, we added members until it finally became an actual functioning band, and so now here we are, like you said, all these years later, ready to release album number 5.
Well, Matt, personally, I'm a big fan of Theocracy, and I feel I've kind of come to the Theocracy party, a little late. Only discovering you guys about 7 years ago with the last record, the 4th record you guys put out, Ghost Ship. Phenomenal record. And I remember listening to this record when it came out in 2017. I'm sorry, 2016. And not really having heard this kind of music within Christian music. I mean, obviously, you've got a lot of bands in mainstream. Like when I first listened to Ghost Ship, the first band that came to my mind was Dream Theater. I'm like,
Mm.
wow, these guys have that very much a Dream Theater type sound, but yet it was also unique to you guys. And as I'm sitting here listening to Ghost Ship, I mean, of course, the title track from that record was. I'm sitting here listening to these lyrics. I'm like, I love how this guy puts these songs together. It's like just the way he paints these messages with this, allegorical ghost ship, if you will. And it drew me in. When you talk to fans and stuff like that, maybe fans that are new to the band out in the tour, and they say, "Wow, you guys sound like Dream Theater. You guys sound like this band and stuff." Do you guys get that a lot when you're on tour?
Sometimes, I guess probably more so early on. I guess we've been around long enough now where it's kind of, the people that know us kind of know what to expect. But it's funny that you say that, because that was that was a big part of the reason that I started the band back in the day, because being a Christian, I wanted to find bands that sounded like, the music that I loved. And at that point, I was kind of, with my age, I was kind of, I was too young, so I missed the 80s stuff. And then I came in kind of, in the middle there, in the 90s stuff, where, all the Christian bands that I heard, in my admittedly very limited experience, in the growing up in the country, but it was kind of, they sounded like other stuff on the radio that I wasn't into, or this and that. So it felt like, I was like, man, I really wish there was a band that had the kind of the musicality and the depth to the lyrics that I really love, that had Christ at the center. And so I thought, and again, I'm sure those bands were out there. It was just my limited access and some sort of experience at the time. So I just thought, oh, if I can't find it, I may as well write it, and so that's how it came about. So it's no surprise that you hear those parallels, because I loved some of those bands, as a kid, and I was really kind of hungry for that type of uh something that wasn't shallow, and something that had depth to it, and you could go back and listen over and over and over again and find new things. And while I would never, compare myself to some of the those greats in terms of like what we've done, it's a compliment to hear you say things like that, because it's something that I felt was missing just as a music listener, and a believer in what I wanted to hear.
Well, that's amazing. And that's that I had thought of that because really the only songs that I had really heard from bands like that, like Dream Theater and stuff like that, were like Pull Me Under was one of the tracks that really got me listening to that group. One of the other bands, artists that really influenced me personally as like a guitarist was Joe Satriani. I mean, very instrumental music, and even noticed a little bit of that influence within the guitar section of Theocracy. And going back to 2016, you guys released the record Ghost Ship, which up until today, the release of Mosaic, was the last record. And I'm a member of a lot of fan groups, like on Facebook and stuff, and you hear all this chatter and stuff about when's this band going to release a record, when's this band, or they'll talk about current releases. But one band that always popped up in everyone's conversations was Theocracy. And a lot of people like me love Ghost Ship, and they're like, okay, it's been almost 7 years now. Is Theocracy done? Are they going to put out another record? Because at the time, before you guys actually announced the release of Mosaic, you guys had mentioned that new music was coming, but other than that, it was like all this intrigue and mystery surrounding it. So when you guys finally announced the release of this new record, I know that day when that was announced, it's like these internet fan groups just blew up. It's like people so excited about this, and so the wait is no more. Today we finally get an unleashed brand new record entitled Mosaic, and it's been a long time coming. But tell us about this new record and the process of getting this one out there.
Wow, that's great to hear. I appreciate you saying that. I'm I will never not be kind of blown away that people care so much. That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny, it's one of those, it's kind of a double-edged thing, because on the one hand, it to me it feels like it's been about 3 years since Ghost Ship, so I kind of can't believe that it's been as long as it has. And it wasn't, it wasn't planned. It was a combination of factors. It's long story short, kind of after Ghost Ship, I really sort of hit a wall of burnout, from all these albums just take so much out of me. So doing 4 of them, the tours, the shows, the work, studio work that I do for other bands, and all the travel and everything just kind of caught up to me at once. So there was a point where it was, I told the guys, I was like, I can't do another one right now. I need some time. I need to step away. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And then, but then eventually a couple songs come. And so then it's like, all right, well, there's still something in the tank, I guess, at least. And then COVID happened. And then we had a lineup change, and then we had a record label change. So it was like, man, all these things happen, and it kind of compounded and compounded. And then suddenly it's 7 years later somehow. So, so it's a huge relief to have the thing finally coming out. It feels like it's been done and ready for just so long, but between the label stuff especially, it kind of sat and we waited and waited until the time is finally right, and then now here we are at last. So I'm very thankful.
Yeah, and it's even though we throw out a number like 7 years, it has been 7 years since Ghost Ship released. the one thing that I can, think of right off the bat is, when I was reading these comments and stuff, I'm like, good things take time. And when it comes to a great record, God orchestrates things in his timing. And I knew that eventually we would see this record, but I was absolutely blown away when I got a chance to actually sit down and listen to this. I got a advanced copy of the record 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I've been able to get a chance to really dig into these songs. And one thing I noticed about, all of your records as a whole, like I said, I started off with Ghost Ship, and I'm like, okay, I want to hear more from these guys. So I went back to the first three records. Mirror of Souls especially was a great record. And I noticed it a lot with the records from Theocracy is you guys have, overall themes and stuff with these records. Now with Mosaic, did you have like a theme that you had in mind when you guys were sitting down and writing and, recording this new record?
There are actually no, it's funny. I was talking about this earlier. It's a lot of these things kind of don't become apparent until you sort of are able to get a little distance and step away. So, now with the album being done and finally coming out and being able to kind of listen to it with a little separation and kind of fresh ears, and that way you sort of start to see themes that pop up repeatedly in the lyrics. But there's no over, it's not a concept album, there's no overall theme or anything like that. But like there's a lot of thinking about death, thinking about the brevity of life, the legacy we leave, what you're living for, things like that. I think, I lost all my grandparents in between these two records. Other family members were passing away. So these weren't things that I was necessarily consciously thinking about. I mean, they show up consciously, obviously, in songs like, The Greatest Hope or Return to Dust and things like that. But, I can see kind of looking up now, it's like, oh, this must have been sort of in my mind more than I realized, and they kind of come to the forefront in lines here and there. But in general, I would say no, because the songs are written sort of over a few years, so there wasn't necessarily any intentional intentional through line, just kind of whatever shows up accidentally, I guess.
Right. I was like kind of debating on whether to mention this, but when you mentioned, the reasons behind, writing some of these songs, I'm sorry to hear about your grandparents. I actually lost my wife, Shannon, to COVID 2 years ago. And I know that songs have really helped me get through these things. And, listening to this record, there was a lot of like challenging things that you write about here. Return to Dust, just a reminder of where we came from. And just, the overall message that I got from this record was just not losing hope that, things are going to happen all around us. And, that's one thing that I like about your music is that, you remind people in all of like everything that you're doing as far as songwriting goes, reminding people that, life happens around you, but to cling to God, and that, he always comes through for us. So that's the one thing I got from this. And, there's so many songs on this record that we could talk about, obviously, but for time's sake, we're going to highlight a few of these. The first taste of this new record came a couple months back when you guys released the first single, Return to Dust, and then the title track, Mosaic. What was the driving force behind these two cuts from the record, and, the decision to feature them as the first couple songs from the new record?
Well, first off, I'm really sorry to hear about your wife.
Thank you.
It's so the concept of Mosaic, which came pretty early, is kind of, it sort of touches on what you're referencing, in that it's about how sort of we can't see the big picture of our lives that God can see. We can only see the individual vignette, so to speak, a week here or a year there, and kind of patterns, but we don't see the things that he's using, these events or whatever to kind of create, the larger mosaic. So I was thinking about that, and that's kind of what that song is about. And then um, I mentioned that concept to Stephen Howard, the guy who did our artwork for us, and he came up with a beautiful representation of that. And so that was, that song was planned to be the first video and single. And then with Return to Dust, people who heard the album kept saying, this song's so catchy and I can't get it out of my head. It's so memorable. This should be the first thing people hear, et cetera. And our label had planned to do 2 music videos. And so it seemed like it made sense for those to be the 2. So that's why they were chosen, I guess.
Well, we're going to go ahead and spin one of the music videos for Return to Dust. What do you remember about this session of recording the video for this song? It's like, at all your music videos that you guys have done over the years, this one, another cool music video, but what do you remember about, recording the video for this one?
We did both the videos in the same weekend in the same place. And we did Mosaic first, and that one's a little more elaborate, as you can tell. So the challenge with Return to Dust was how do we make it not seem like the same place? How do we, what do we do? So that's why it's black and white. It's very stark. It's just basically a performance video. Yeah. And that song, I would say, was the only one that was kind of written, not to order, but when I kind of stepped back and listened to the material that I had for the record, I realized that the album was kind of missing that sort of mid-tempo, kind of anthem, sing-along, simple track. So just in order to make the listening experience complete as a whole for the album, I wrote that song. I think it was the last one. So that's where that came in and ended up being the first single.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and check out that music video. Here's Theocracy's Return to Dust. That was the music video for Return the Dust from Theocracy. I'm joined by Matt Smith, lead singer of the band. And, as mentioned, Theocracy has a lot of influences musically. And, one of my favorite tracks from this record was Liar, Fool, or Messiah, which, tells the story of Jesus's arrest. And I might add, this song, in my opinion, has a very Metallica-like sound to it. Um, and there's so many different kind of sounds. Like this record has some softer tracks on it, and then it's got the heavy tracks that we're used to hearing from Theocracy. But one thing that I've noticed is that over the years you guys have put out some pretty long and epic tracks, and including the 22-minute long title track for Mirror of Souls, and you had three 11+ minute songs alone on the self-titled 2004 record. So of course we couldn't talk about Mosaic without talking about the mammoth of a song on this one called Red Sea. And like the breathtaking story of Moses parting the Red Sea in the book of Genesis, this song is nearly 20 minutes long. Putting an epic end to this new record. Tell us the story behind putting this one together, Theocracy's second longest track to date. And when you're writing these things, when you first wrote Red Sea, was this something that you had in mind of being a song that was going to be nearly 20 minutes long?
Well, that song is actually an interesting story because that is one of the oldest ideas that has ever come out on a Theocracy record. I wrote that song when I was 19, and it was the last. There've always been sort of ideas from the archive that have come out on the various albums over the years, and that was the last one that I was hanging on to because I was so young when I wrote it that it was kind of juvenile, and it just wasn't up to the standard that it needed to be to be on a Theocracy record. So it was always sort of in the back of my mind, am I going to ever be able to revisit this one? Is it going to be worth it? Is there enough there, etc. And then during COVID and lockdowns and all of that, I thought, well, now's the time. So I pulled it out, and I threw some parts away, and I rewrote some parts, and I kept the stuff that was good, and I rewrote the lyrics and kind of turned it into what you hear now. Basically did a demo of this kind of new arrangement and sent it to the band, and to my surprise, they all loved it, and they said, yeah, this is great, we got to put it out. So yeah, I remember that it worked sort of like all our long songs work, in that we never plan on them to be that long, and then it's, start writing. I mean, even Mirror of Souls, which you mentioned earlier, I remember thinking that would probably be 8 to 10 minutes or something, and it ended up being 23. It's like once you start putting the story together and finding where it needs to go, and the lyrics pay off, and it has kind of a point to it, suddenly all that time has gone by. So but that one, it's basically split into two halves. The first part tells like you said, the story from Genesis of the Israelites and Moses and the Red Sea, and then the second one kind of makes it a spiritual parallel of the Red Sea being, the blood of Christ, and it takes on a personal, it just goes somewhere different to more like a more personal spiritual meaning. So I thought, I struggled with it for a while, thinking, is this too obvious? Is this too cheesy? But then once we put it together, I felt like it worked. It worked pretty well.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you included that on there, because and you're the second person I've talked to in the last couple of weeks that we've done an interview with that has included this song, from their teen years. I spoke to country superstar Travis Tritt a couple of weeks ago, and
Oh, wow.
one of the songs on his new record he wrote when he was 15 years old, and
Wow.
he just put it out on his first gospel record. So it's those ideas, man, those older ideas that can come back, and God can really use these for something so pertinent and relevant even now. So I'm so glad that you included that on there. And in closing, Matt, when fans have listened to this new record, Mosaic, what's the biggest thing that you and the band want them to take away from it after they hear it?
With all our stuff, I always say all I can do is kind of write from the heart and what I'm going through and what I'm what God's laid on my heart at that time. And that can be, some of our songs are historical, some of them are very personal, some of them are, personal in the way that, they're about something that happened to a friend of mine or someone I know or family members and things like that. But there always has to be some thread, something that I can latch on to personally to be able to write it and to be able to get behind it. So after this record, the same as every record, I always just pray and say, Lord, if let this find people where they are and where they let it be what they need to hear when they need to hear it, whatever that is. And the thing that is amazing that we've been blessed enough to see is that takes on so many different forms. I mean, sometimes it's the things that I had in mind when I was writing it. Sometimes it's something completely different in the way that God uses it to speak to people that surprises even me. People will come up after shows and say, I was going to kill myself, and then I heard this song, or this song helped save my marriage, or this and that, which obviously I can't take any credit for anything like that. That's all God using these things in the way that he chooses to. But it's a pretty amazing thing because when writing it, sometimes that could be the furthest thing from my mind, sometimes in the way that it speaks to someone in their life at that time, because you never know, where someone is in their walk or what they're going through, in their journey or what their struggles. And so,
Right.
I think the thing that I've always tried to do is just honesty. We've never shied away from struggles. We've never shied away from how hard life is, and kind of and spotlighted just the pretty Christianity, so to speak. You know what I mean? So right. I think that's why people latch on the way they have, because they can tell it's coming from an honest place, and they can tell that they can relate to some of the struggles in there. So that's all we can do is pray that it's used, if it's used to help people, just to help them where they are. It's beyond us at that point. So
amen. Well, Theocracy's Matt Smith has been with us today. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today, man. I hope you feel better, and we're really looking forward to seeing what the Lord does with this new record. Masterpiece, man. You guys put together a phenomenal record. Guys, Theocracy's new record album, Mosaic, is out now where music is available, and you can also get more information on them as well by visiting theocracymusic.com. Get all their music, merchandise, and all that. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today, brother.
Thank you, Jay. It's been a real pleasure, and sorry again for sounding like a frog, but I appreciate your patience and dealing with me, and thank you so much for all the kind words and for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, you're good, man. You have a great day.
Likewise.